Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Hope you're doing well, inshallah, this evening. I want to look at chapter number 4 in our book that we're going through, William Dalrymple's book, The Anarchy, The Relentless Rise of the East India Company. So if you've been following the previous few lectures, this lecture will also make sense. But in this chapter, we're going to look at some more people that are going to be introduced in this book. We're going to continue with one of our key people that came up in the previous chapter, which is Robert Clive. But in this chapter, he begins to make his exit. He begins to leave India, a country that he hated but was happy to make money from. And we'll talk about how different leaders use the company to their advantage in many, many ways. So after the defeat at Plassey, to celebrate the anniversary of the Plassey Revolution, 12 months after this, Mir Jafar, if you remember, he was the one that betrayed his Nawaab before. He decided to pay a visit to Calcutta. He decided to visit Calcutta, and he met with Robert Clive, who helped him, right? So they were friends, partners in crime. Robert Clive by now was extremely wealthy, and we talked about this in the previous chapter. He had a sense of swaggering self-confidence, and at this period he began to show signs of regretting sharing power with the Mughals at all. So he felt that I don't even need Mir Jafar to help me. I can basically take India all by myself. In fact, in one place he says, "I am fully persuaded that after the Battle of Plassey, I could have appropriated the whole country to the company and preserved it afterwards with as much ease as Mir Jafar, the present governor now does." Okay, through the terror of English arms and their influence. Okay, so there was a relationship between Mir Jafar and Robert Clive. What people of back in England were hearing about Robert Clive's success, and they were familiar now. They had heard about the huge amounts of wealth that Robert Clive had acquired, and a new word became used in the English dictionary. It became anglicized, and that was the word loot. The word loot, because this was what Clive was bringing back with him back to England as well. So on 5th February 1760, him and his wife Margaret, they set sail home, and he came back to England. Soon as he left Bengal, where he had made all his money, if you like, it was beginning to fall into anarchy. So one of the titles of the book is Anarchy. So the empire, or Bengal at least, was falling into a state of chaos as well. There was a young person called Warren Hastings. Warren Hastings was a company resident or a company ambassador at a place called Murshidabad, and he was concerned at what he was seeing in terms of the anarchy that had been unleashed on the back of the company's excessive behavior in Bengal. People were mutinous, people were starving. It had only been 3 years since the Battle of Plassey, and this town, which was one of the wealthiest towns in India, was now a town or a place which was ravaged. Now, Mir Jafar, who had been the puppet governor, if you like, or puppet Nawab at the time, he was also responsible for this as well. So it wasn't just Robert Clive, it was also his friend, if you like, Mir Jafar, who was showing off and wasting a lot of the resources of India as well. And it became clear to everyone that Mir Jafar was simply not capable of ruling Bengal. He was an uneducated Arab soldier. He had no political skills and little conception of how to run a state or administer its finances. Clive himself calmly noted before he boarded a ship with his money that Mir Jafar had proved a prince of little capacity, and this is the title of the chapter. He was a prince who was not qualified to run this enclave, and not at all blessed with the talent of gaining the love and confidence of his principal officers. His mismanagement has thrown the country into the greatest confusion. By 1760, three simultaneous rebellions had broken out in places that he was in charge of. The Mughal nobility and officers of the army came to be increasingly resentful of the massive tribute that Mir Jafar had so fortunately agreed to pay for company support in throwing Siraj-ud-Dawla. So people were beginning to resent him, and he was giving a lot of money away to the company, and people weren't getting a share of that money, which was their money. It was their wealth, and so they were being deprived of payments, and this was creating a lot of resentment. The state was being crippled. The empire was being crippled by this deal where the company was making lots and lots of money on the back of India. The Jagat Sets, the financiers who we talked about in the previous video, who were part of the coup, the first coup, they began to refuse giving loans for military expeditions, and they also began to leave this area as well. So Mir Jafar is an important person. He's very Robert Clive, his friend, if you like, has left for England with all his money. He's not coming back anymore. He hates India. He's done what he needs to do. He's plundered India, and he's left Mir Jafar with chaos. As Mir Jafar stumbled at his treasury and his treasury emptied, intrigue festered in the Murshidabad court, and his military machine seemed locked in paralysis. Enter a third person. So Robert Clive has left the scene. Now you have Mir Jafar. Now you have his son. His son, who was vigorous but extremely violent, and his name was Miran, Miran, and he was a very vicious person. So now you have Mir Jafar, and then you have Miran, his son, who's sort of entering the theater, if you like, of play. Now, the first thing he did was he wiped out any competition from any of the Mughal sort of empire rulers that were around him. So, for example, we talked about Ali Verdi Khan. So he killed all of his family, anyone that was part of his family, to prevent any counter coup. And then he sent his henchmen to drown the entire harem of Ali Verdi Khan and Siraj-ud-Dawla. So made sure that nobody could then stake a claim to this empire as well. Any other potential rivals were also eliminated as well. And so Miran was quite a vicious person, the son of Mir Jafar as well. The company itself, rather than helping Mir Jafar, which was what it was meant to do, was actively engaged in undermining the economy, which sustained him, and it actually became much more aggressive. So private traders were coming in, and they were literally looting the country. They were literally ransacking India, and they weren't respecting any of the regulations that Mir Jafar had placed on the company officials or any of the tradespeople who'd made their way to India. Okay, and one of the writers actually says, the further you went from Calcutta, the worse the situation became. A European visiting the upper parts of the Ganges finds mere robbers in charge of company affairs, right? Who think of nothing of committing the most atrocious acts of tyranny or subaltern thieves, whose despicably villainy dishonors the British nation, whose principles of honor and humanity they seem totally to have rejected. So there was no honor, there was no dignity. This company was literally doing whatever it wanted with India. So the country was in anarchy. Entire India was by now on the back of the empire, on the defeat of the empire, the cracking of the empire, was basically in a state of anarchy. Warren Hastings, who was somewhat sympathetic to India, if you read his writings, you get the impression that he was very much different to Robert Clive, who was just interested in milking India. Warren Hastings was a lot more sympathetic, and he began exposing a lot of the illicit activities and the extortion that the company was engaged in. Now, let me just mention a little bit about Warren Hastings, because he's quite an important person in the East India Company. Now, he was a rising star of the East India Company's Bengal administration. He had never known either of his parents. His mother had died in childbirth, and his father disappeared to Barbados soon after, where he first remarried, then promptly died. Warren was brought up by his grandfather and educated in a charity school with the poorest children in the Gloucester village of Dalesford. At some point, he was rescued by an uncle who sent him to London to be educated at Westminster, where he said to have played cricket with Edward Gibbon. Edward Gibbon is a very famous historian of the Roman Empire, the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. There, Hastings quickly excelled as a school's top scholar, but was forced to leave at age only 16 when his uncle died. His guardian found him a place as a writer in the company and shipped him straight out to Bengal just in time to become a prisoner of Siraj-ud-Dawla, which we talked about in the previous chapter as well. By then, working as a buyer of silk in the villages around Mushirabad, he was fluent in Urdu and Bengali and working hard on his Persian. Hastings had already fallen for his adopted country, which he had always maintained he loved a little more than his native one. So you can see here that Hastings loved India more than he actually loved his home country, which was England as well. So he was someone who defended the right of the Bengalis, for example, who were defenseless in the face of plunder by the company as well. And he actually says himself that I can no longer put up with them without injury to my own character. He said, I'm fed up with these guys pillaging Bengal as well. So this is something to bear in mind as well. He was quickly promoted to become the company's resident at Mir Jafar's court, where his job was to try and keep the hapless Nawab's regime from collapse. So the puppet governor, the puppet Nawaab, was installed by Robert Clive, and his job was basically keep Mir Jafar's fragile and frail empire from falling apart, because of course if that happened there would be anarchy. So they used the puppet Nawab to maintain things as well. Okay. Now there was a lot of alienation, like I talked about, who might have supported the Mir Jafar, who was in charge as well. But it also did much to alienate powerful individuals who might otherwise have been tempted to throw in their lot with the company back regime. Okay, so there was a famous Kashmiri trader by the name of Mir Ashraf. So what happened was two groups of people in particular turned against Mir Jafar. So Mir Jafar was a Nawab, but people weren't happy with him. So one of them was a person called Mir Ashraf. And they had very favorable relationship with the Nawab as well. And until the Battle of Plassey, they had found it easy to dominate the saltpeter trade with the support of Nawabs. So basically, Mir Jafar was providing protection to Mir Ashraf and his trade in saltpeter as well. And what happened was, before Plassey, these complaints about Mir Ashraf were simply ignored by Nawab Ali Verdi Khan. So they weren't really listening to him, who dismissed the petitions against him against his friend by English interpreter as sort of presumptuous. But within 2 months of the overthrow of Siraj-ud-Dawla, the company's merchants in Patna were not only successful in encroaching upon Mir Ashraf's trade, they actually seized his entire saltpeter stocks by force of arms in August 1757. Okay, so they were really appalled by the abuses of the company as well. And as a result of these abuses, both Mir Ashraf and the influential Dagat Sats, the financiers, had turned against the new regime and were actively writing letters to the one force they thought they might still be able to liberate them from Bengal. So they weren't happy with Mir Jafar. They weren't happy with the East India Company, who weren't helping them. They were rinsing them. So the Jagat Sats, the financiers, and Mir Ashraf, who was losing a lot of his trade, looked elsewhere. And if you remember, in the previous chapter, we talked about the one of the last emperors, really, Shah Alam. Right? Shah Alam had escaped from Delhi, and he'd been making his way east as well. And he'd escaped from Delhi, and he was in the Ganges Delta as well. And he was looking for a kingdom to rule. Okay, and people were really joining his ranks because they felt that this might be someone who can save and salvage the empire. So Mir Jafar, Robert Clive has left for England, not coming back with his wife. Mir Jafar's there. People are not happy with him. His son Miran is not someone that's very, very popular. And then you've got people who normally would have been happy, Mir Ashraf and the Jagat Saz, who are now saying, look, we've had enough. They're not listening to us. They're too close to the company. And we're going to look towards Shah Alam, who's looking for somewhere to rule, who maybe can help us. Okay, so the 9th of February 1760, just 4 days after Clive had left India, Shah Alam crossed the boundary into Mir Jafar's dominions. The emperor, who'd been kicked out of Delhi, had actually entered into Bengal as well, and announced to his followers that the time had come to retake the prosperous and rich province of Bengal for the empire. Right, so people were rallying behind him. Okay, and he really wanted to do this. Remember, he wasn't happy with Imadul Mulk. Imadul Mulk was the vizier in Delhi who tried to kill him. Right, so he'd escaped from Delhi, and his sights were still on going back to Delhi, because that was the center of the empire. But he needed money, he needed finance, he needed people. So he felt that maybe if I establish something here, then I can return back to Delhi and take control and take the empire back as well. Um, but his first goal, like I mentioned, encouraged by Mir Ashraf and other people, was to attack Mir Jafar's dominion and to attack his western headquarters in a place called Patna. This is where he wanted to go as well. And they managed to get a huge army together to attack Mir Jafar's fort in Patna as well. So in going, just leaving that for a second and going back to Delhi with Imadul Mulk, Murshidabad in Bengal was falling apart. The Mughal Empire center, the city of Delhi, was even worse. Historians tell us that it was much worse in Delhi than it was in Bengal as well. He says here, like some rotting carcass preyed upon by rival packs of jackals, what was left of his riches provided intermittent sustenance to a succession of passing armies, as the city was alternately occupied and looted by Maratha raiders from the south and Afghan invaders from the north. So Delhi was basically being pillaged. Throughout these successive occupations, Imadul Mulk had somehow clung to power in the ruins of Delhi with the backing of the Marathas, sometimes ignoring, sometimes bullying his powerless puppet monarch, Shah Alam's father. So Shah Alam was now in Bengal, making his way to take over Bengal. And his father, who was a puppet governor in Delhi, his father's name was Alamgir II. We talked about him in the previous lecture. And the other problem was that when Imadul Mulk was trying to maintain Delhi with the father of Shah Alam as the puppet emperor, Alamgir II, there was a threat from the north, from Afghanistan, from someone called Ahmad Shah Durrani. Ahmad Shah Durrani was also someone who has set his eyes upon pillaging Delhi. And he was, interestingly, also married to Alamgir's daughter. So he was married to the daughter of the emperor, the puppet emperor, and who he feared would actually side with his father-in-law. So, Imadul Mulk was concerned that if he enters into Delhi and he ransacks Delhi, he's going to support his father-in-law because he's married to his daughter, right? And so the vizier decided that he wanted to rid himself of his royal, this sort of emperor, and entirely before anything happened to him. Okay, so Imadul Mulk basically already mistrusted the king, and he basically got him killed. It's a long story; it's mentioned in the book. Imadul Mulk got rid of him because he didn't want anything to happen to him as well. Now, this is what was happening in Delhi. So Imadul Mulk was fearing an invasion from Afghanistan, and he just killed the puppet emperor, Alamgir II. Shah Alam, the son of Alamgir II, gets to hear about his father being killed in Delhi, being murdered in Delhi, but he was continuing his march towards the east. So he always wanted to go back to Delhi, but right now his sights were set upon Bengal. Okay, he didn't have much money; he was penniless. But people were rallying behind him because he symbolized the Mughal Empire, right? He was the last person that was really holding up the empire. He didn't have a modern army as well, so he didn't have an army, and he didn't have an army which would allow him to besiege walled cities. So he didn't really have a sophisticated army that would allow him to penetrate where he wanted to get to. And then he managed to capture part of what he was after. So he says here, on 23rd of December 759 at Gauthali near Allahabad, the young emperor emerged from the royal tents, having shut himself away for 3 days of state mourning for his father. Okay, and people had then announced him. People had pledged allegiance to him as the emperor of India, of the Mughal Empire. And so everything was under his orders. But of course, he had to confront Mir Jafar, who was put in there by the company. So his attempt to capture Bengal, which is what he really wanted, really started off really well. And he went after Miran as well, the son of Mir Jafar. However, certain errors led him to a state where he had to flee and he was defeated. Okay. Um, and he managed to get out of wealth, but he wasn't very successful. Um, so they took the company by surprise. Shah Alam took the company by surprise, and then once they managed to take control, Mir Jafar was defeated, um, and he ran away. Basically, Mir Jafar ran away, and uh, Shah Alam was victorious at this stage as well. Okay, um, and the company began to panic a little bit as well. Okay, um, and the emperor didn't. He didn't. The mistake he made was when he besieged the city, he didn't enter the city. He waited, and that gave enough time for the gates to be shut and the company soldiers to sort of hold themselves. Um, so the undefended city of Murshidabad, where he hoped he would possess himself Mir Jafar's person and to the wealth of such a rich capital, he wanted to go and get control of this. However, the company then began to chase them away, began to chase them back. Well, so the speed and courage shown by Shah Alam's small force took the company by surprise, and then he decided to head to a place called Murshidabad, which was the center of where Mir Jafar was, right? And he felt that because this was undefended, it wasn't a defended place as such, he felt that he could get there. He was delayed in getting there. He didn't get there as quick as he should have done. He made an error where he stopped for a few days to rest, and that gave enough time for Mir Jafar and the soldiers of the company to make their way back and defeat him as well. So after several months of dwindling fortune and deserting troops, the final defeat of the emperor's army took place at the Battle of Helsa near Budgaya. So he wasn't able to take. So he had some victory, but he wasn't able to take Murshidabad, where he was ultimately defeated by the Mir Jafar's army and supported by the soldiers of the company as well. So another stray shot wounded the elephant itself, which carried off the field, carrying the emperor with it. So the elephant that he was on was injured in this battle as well, and he had to run away. Mir Jafar, who is an interesting character again, he was up to his usual devious tactics and managed to corrupt Shah Alam's commander. So Shah Alam had a commander, of course, who was in charge of the army, someone called Gamkar Khan, and other soldiers, other leading soldiers, who crossed sides. So they basically left Shah Alam's army and joined the forces of the Nawab. So the emperor was betrayed by his own people. Shah Alam was betrayed by his own people as well. Okay. Now let's return back to Mir. So this is what happened with Shah Alam. So he's been made to flee, and we'll come back to him in a moment. Again, he had to run away. So he was defeated. The last sort of emperor who could have really maintained the empire. Now Miran, who we talked about before, who is the son of Mir Jafar, and the chapter is named after Mir Jafar, the prince of little capacity. They say that he was an evil person, but he was killed by lightning, which is quite bizarre. There's a story where it says that he was killed by lightning. But the most probable reason that he was actually killed, he was supposed to be the person who was going to inherit from his father the empire, right? He was supposed to be the next Nawab after Mir Jafar passes away. However, the most probable candidate in terms of what killed him or who killed him was said to be a bereaved concubine who had lost a sister to Miran's murderous tendencies, and who was then said to have covered up her revenge by setting fire to the tent. So his tent was burned down, rather than his tent being burnt down by a lightning strike. Many rejoiced at the death of the bloodthirsty and immoral prince, but his father Mir Jafar, for his father Mir Jafar, this was a last straw. It's really destroyed as well. Now, what happened was, who's going to come in place of Miran, right? You don't have anyone to replace the puppet Nawab. So his son-in-law Mir Qasim was an ideal candidate, and he was sent down by the company to basically take control. And he met the new governor, someone called Henry Van Sittart, and they came up with a sophisticated plan. Remember, the Nawabs were completely in debt to the company. They had a lot of debts that they needed to pay off to the company. And so they came up with a plan to solve the company's financial problems because they weren't getting as money as they wanted to, and to repay the debt that the Nawabs at Murshidabad owed to the company. So what they did was they gave to the company places like Burdwan, Midnapur, and Chittagong, which were sufficient territories to pay for the upkeep of both armies. And Van Sittart, in the governor, in return, who was at Calcutta now, decided that, you know what, in return, I'll back a second coup. So we're talking about second coup now. It's going to happen. And this was to put Mir Qasim on the throne in place of his father-in-law. So the company was very much involved with the politics of the empire, right? It wasn't just, doing business. It was very much running the show by now in India. So Mir Jafar, who they weren't happy with, they wanted to replace him with his son Mir Qasim, and so they agreed to a coup which would essentially replace Mir Jafar with Mir Qasim. Okay. And so the company engineered the second revolution against their own puppet, because Mir Jafar was installed by them anyway. He was their puppet Nawab, but they engineered a revolution against him, and he was replaced by someone else they wanted instead, which was his son-in-law Mir Qasim. Okay, they felt that this person would serve their interest. However, it turned out that he was a much more capable ruler. So while Mir Jafar was seen as a prince of little capacity, Mir Mir Qasim was seen to be someone who was able to change and bring money back and restrain a lot of problems that were happening in Bengal as well. So he was able to organize an army and do lots of amazing stuff while he was a Nawab as well. And of course, this would have made the company feel very, very unsettled at the new Nawab. Okay. But he also had a darker side where people began to disappear. Rich landowners and bureaucrats were taken, their wealth was taken from them. So there was a dark, sinister side to Mir Qasim, who had now been installed through a coup by the company, as the Nawab of Bengal. So that was something that was happening in Bengal. Now let's return back to the Mughal emperor Shah Alam. Right, so Shah Alam has had to flee. He's been defeated. So after the Battle of Helsa in early January 1761, he found himself in the unexpected position of being on a run from the mercenary troops of a once humble trading company. So the emperor at the time of the Mughal Empire was running away from what was once a small trading company, right? So this how fortunes have changed and altered in this short period of time. And so he realized that what I can do actually is to meet with the company and strike a deal. Essentially, I will go to the company and I will say to them that, look, I can benefit working with you, and you can benefit by having me on your side. In essence, the company didn't have any legitimate right to rule, right? Like the people wouldn't obey the East India Company. But if they had Shah Alam as their puppet emperor, then they could do whatever they want, as long as he followed, he worked under them. So because it was in Shah Alam's power to grant them legitimacy that they needed. So maybe he thought an alliance could be formed and British arms could carry him back to Delhi. His eyes was always on Delhi, and remove Imadul Mulk and then restore him to his rightful throne that he felt was his. So the company felt this was beneficial, and Shah Alam, the emperor, or the person who was seeking to be the emperor, felt this was in his interest as well. Of course, there's going to be someone who's not going to be happy with this, and that's going to be Mir Qasim in Bengal, right? The one who's now in charge of in the Nawab in Bengal. So that if the company had the emperor under their clutches, right, there was no need for him. There was no need to have this puppet Nawab in Bengal as well. So So this was something that was also a worry for Mir Qasim as well. Um, so Shah Alam wanted to use the company to basically get back at Delhi, to take care and to take control of Delhi. So Shah Alam wanted his new ally, the company, to send a regiment of sepoys immediately to install him back on his throne in Delhi. Okay. Um, and many in the army, even some in Calcutta, were attracted by the idea of a Delhi expedition. But given the turbulence of the capital, which was currently hosting yet another unvisited visit from a bloodthirsty Afghan monarch, Ahmad Shah Durrani. You remember when I said he was on his way? He's already made his way down into Delhi. So the company was like, look, let's just leave Delhi for now. Let him plunder Delhi, like it happened before. Let them take all their wealth. Let them take what they want to do. Let's not engage with the Afghan warriors. And then once they've gone, then we'll help you, Shah Alam, take back Delhi. Okay. And he wouldn't listen, basically. So he was determined to take back Delhi. And the vizier also warned him that it's not a good idea. Like, Durrani is not a person you want to mess around with. So just wait till he's done what he's needed to do, and then you can go. So this is what happened with Shah Alam over there. Meanwhile, Bengal was left under the increasingly uneasy joint rule of Mir Qasim and the company. So you got Shah Alam, who's got his eyes on Delhi. The company's telling him, look, don't go there. And now you got in Bengal in the rulership or kingship or the authority of Mir Qasim and the company, which were both jointly running, if you like. But really, the company was running Bengal as well. Now, there was two governments basically in Bengal. There was a company and there was Mir Qasim, and things were becoming very, very, very hostile between both parties as well. There was, for example, there was a person called William Ellis, who was quite a paranoid person, and he had a factory in a place called Patna, and he was actively engaging a rebellion against Mir Qasim. Right, he was just like, let's just get rid of this guy, and let's just take control of Bengal as well. And he was doing everything he could to undermine Mir Qasim as well. Hastings was particularly Warren Hastings was particularly critical of William Ellis, and he felt that he was being extremely disrespectful towards Mir Qasim as well. So Mir Qasim was fed up with Ellis and his aggression and his sort of attitude of like just doing whatever he wants in Bengal. And so he felt that it's time to fight back. It's time to fight back against the company. And he decided to make a stand. Okay. And a war broke out, a clash broke out in 1763 between Mir Qasim's men and those of the company. And eventually, we'll talk about this in next lecture. This led to a war, the second time now, between the Mughals and the company itself. So there's a lot to learn from this chapter as well, chapter number 4 in the book. As you can see that they're fighting, even the Mughals, the rulers, the Nawabs are fighting amongst themselves. They're not exactly embodiments of piety or good, virtuous people. And the company is using all of this to their advantage because primarily they're interested in making money, and so is everybody else. So everybody else is interested in making, cashing in this cow, which is India, to make as much money as they can from India as well. We'll leave it at that. I hope you found that useful. I'll continue if people find it useful. I've had a lot of good feedback, so I'll continue with chapter 5 soon. Until then, stay safe, and I'll see you all soon, very, very soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.